Hello there guys and welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week I am once again joined by Janine Mercer of the ODDentity podcast and PodMoth. Now to clarify, this is part 2, so if you haven't already, I really recommend you go back and listen to part 1 of our chat. And also if you really enjoy this chat, I do recommend you go back and listen to episode 78 of Genuine Chit-Chat, which was Janine Mercer's first appearance on the show. I have included links in the description to the ODDentity podcast website, PodMoth Media's site, as well as the publication that Janine also does called Corvus Review, so make sure you check those out after this chat as well. So a couple of quick bullet points of the discussion before it gets into full swing. So our chat on hung Jesus from the end of part 1 does continue in this, and then it kind of goes on to a discussion on religiosity and also how the perception of religion in horror films has changed quite a lot, which is quite an interesting thing. We speak more about Janine's eclectic collection of artefacts and whatnot and storytelling, and then towards the end of the chat it turns into a slightly more politically driven discussion, speaking about protesting, being on the wrong side of history, white guilt, those sort of things as well. Before we close up. So they're the kind of things you can expect from this chat. If you enjoyed part 1 of this chat, you're almost certainly going to enjoy part 2 because it's very similar in almost all the same ways. And I had great fun talking to Janine as well. There's no promo today, so the chat will get started after the intro music. Obviously, just want to remind you guys to check out Janine's podcast and PodMoth Media network, as well as Corvus Review and all that sort of jazz. You know, make sure you follow on social media too. And yeah, that's about it from me, guys, at the moment. And I'll be back at the end of the chat to give you guys an update on what's coming up next, some of the other podcasts that I've been collaborating with and involved with, and my second podcast, Star Wars Comics in Canon. So make sure you stick around for that. Anyway, guys, on with the show. Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. There's a big Jesus crucified with the things in his hand, you know, the bolts and things in his hands and his feet with the thorn crown bleeding. Yeah. And when we're having these nice songs about God is love and all that sort of stuff, which is fine, whatever, and you're looking at this crucified guy up there and it's like... That's pretty damn weird. Like that bones are cool. Taxidermy stuff is really cool too, but it's like that is a bit of a push for you and me.
At the college that I got my bachelor's degree from, it's a Franciscan institution. So like St. Francis of Assisi, the poor man from Assisi. And in like when you go down one of their main hallways, at the top of a bank of stairs, like staring you right in the face, is the San Damiano cross. And I don't know if you're familiar with the San Damiano cross, but smaller versions are okay. They're okay. It's okay. When you blow it up to like 17 feet tall, his abs look like an erect penis. So it's literally like a man being crucified and really enjoying it in the middle of this Catholic university. And I'm like, can we go somewhere else and study for this math final? Because I can't stand Jesus' erection right now. I just can't do it today. It's too much. But yeah, they have one in every single classroom, and it's literally like 18 inches high. And it's fine. You can't, like there's nothing the matter with that. But when he's so big, it doesn't work. And the nuns don't get it. They don't see it. And everybody else who's like, I don't know what the word would be, worldly.
Worldly?
Who has maybe seen one, knows that is, so.
That's the package.
Jesus is the whole package.
Yeah, yes. That's it. That's all you need. Jesus' whole package.
Indeed.
It is a weird one with the paranormal, especially, and obviously we're speaking about vampires that are legends and things, but like even with werewolves, there's religion has often played, and I think I don't know if it's because of the media putting a spin on it, films like The Exorcist and stuff, and probably predating that of. It's always been, vampire films, holy water, and crucifixes, as well as multitude of other things. With werewolves, it's the silver bullet, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, that hasn't got a religious context to it necessarily, but
that's sometimes the case for vampires, too. I've seen that in Vampire Legend.
Yeah, it depends, because obviously certain vampire legends they say about garlic, and then as the years have gone on, probably because in films they feel like it's too complicated to be like, oh, if you've eaten garlic bread, unless it's a comedy, you eat the garlic bread, you can't go near vampires. Normally they're just like that. Let's forget about garlic. It's not even talk about it. It's like the core ones. But do you have an idea of why you think maybe there's been this religion in certain legends and lore? There's been the religiosity sort of intertwined.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's not really so outlandish to want to battle evil if you're really religious. You know? And, like, what's the most evil thing that you can think of? Probably fucking Dracula. Like, I mean, you know, I keep saying this, but, like, I'm no expert. But, I mean, it's, like, flavor of the week, right? Like, who are we against this week? And... yeah, I mean, you know, vampires and werewolves, I mean, they're like they're almost like mirrors of like the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves, too. Like, if you think about it, feeding on other people, being a succubus, I mean, that's a very powerful thing, to be able to draw power out of another human being. And then, of course, you know, you have the power of Christ compels you. And that, you know, that holy light to protect you. So, I mean, I feel like it's just this invented kind of, oh yeah, you know, we're going to protect ourselves now with Jesus Christ because Linda Blair is spewing pea soup all over the room. And the only thing that can protect us is, well, potentially a raincoat, but also the power of Jesus Christ. So
it's funny how the culture's moving on, whereas so many more countries and communities are becoming either more agnostic or more atheistic. And because I think the top 3 religions in the world, I think, is Christianity, Islam, and then atheism, due to as a population, I believe it is. And it's very interesting. I think Iceland was one of the first countries, and I think there's been maybe a couple of Nordic countries since. I might be wrong on that, but I know there's been a couple of Northern Eastern European and the Nordic countries and things. Some of them are now, primarily when they do the census, number 1 people are atheist. And what's interesting with that is, not number 1 people, that's made it sound really weird, the number 1 religious, the way people would identify themselves religiously in the census, the number 1 thing was atheism for a couple of these countries. And what's interesting is where the culture is becoming either more atheist or less of militant religious people. There's so many more moderate Christians I know who just believe in a God, and that's relatively it. And it's, with the culture now, has went from, oh, you know, the power of Christ compels you, to now, in a lot of horror films, it's actually a religious cult who are the antagonist, which is a really interesting thing. I know there's been previous things like that, but it's really interesting how it's changed. Sort of with that's probably what it was. Like, oh, religion, Christianity, you want a good Christian household, you know, and therefore in all our movies, the Christians beat evil, and now it's like people understand that there can be toxic religiosity. Right. So now there's a lot more culty films and things about religious cults going mental and executing people. Sure.
And I mean, you know, so if we're talking about, you know, creatures that may or may not exist, in terms of religion, Spring-Heeled Jack was in existence in the 19th century, I think around like 1837. And he was actually used as a tool to keep people in line. He was, you know, it was a story told to little children to make sure that they went to bed on time. But it was also a tool used by the church to have people come in and pray more and pray harder. I mean, Spring-Heeled Jack was this creature that could jump the height of a building and spew blue flames out of his mouth, and would knock on people's doors late at night, and, you know, if a young woman opened up the door, he would literally, like, tear her clothing to shreds with, like, these giant claws. You know, he was a demon. He was a monster. Well, how do we combat this demonic entity? Well, obviously we have to turn to religion. And I think it's really interesting, like you said, the religion has kind of flipped to the other side now of being kind of toxic. And having toxic effect. Like, I think, I watched, what did I watch recently? I forget what it's called. Something about Scientology with Leah Remini?
Oh, maybe? Leah Remini. Yes. She's got a talk show, hasn't she?
Surviving Scientology? Something?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've heard her talk about it on a podcast. Yeah, she used to be a Scientologist ages ago now, and no longer is one.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a whole series where she goes around, she talks to people who were previously involved in Scientology and have essentially run away from that organization to try to separate themselves from it, and have had negative effects from that, have been attacked and have had negative experiences because of the religious group that they've been affiliated with. That's true of Scientology. That's true of the Jonestown massacre. A lot of people, wanted to get away from Jonestown because Jim Jones was toxic and, whatever. And so we have, new Netflix specials coming out about that. We have new Netflix specials coming out about Waco, and how, that kind of religion is toxic. So, I mean, I feel like not all religion is toxic.
No.
But if you give somebody the power to wield, they can take that anywhere they want. Literally anywhere they want. I mean, I know that there are religions out there that take like 10% of your paycheck, and they take that and they put that into their coffers and whatever. Like, that should be a genuine gift, like something that you want to physically give. Like, I remember the collection plate coming around when I would go to church with my grandmother, and the collection plate came around and you put a couple of dollars in the collection plate, and it was an at-will, it was a goodwill gesture.
Yeah.
And then there are these other churches and religions that are like, no, we're just going to garnish your wages. Like, what is that? So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that every religion in the world, all religions are toxic, but I mean, they certainly have the power to be. And I think that's the scary part, Yeah. Like, as is the case with any human being. I mean, anyone is capable of doing something terrible to somebody else. Anybody is capable of losing their senses and, like, harming somebody else and winding up in prison. I always tell people, like, I'm not going to look at people in prison and be like, oh, well, I would never, like, those people are stupid. Like, what are they doing in prison? I would never be so stupid as to do something that would land me in prison. Well, I can't say that. Because I could totally be that person that, like, loses their shit one day and just, does something stupid and winds up in prison. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's not even really so much like religion or non-religion or, whatever. It's just humanity,
Circumstance. A lot
and
of it
circumstance.
Is...
Yeah. I mean, it's just the lot that you've been given, and the lot that you feel like you should do something with. And whether that's positive or negative, I mean, it's up to the person. We have free will. Whatever created us gave us free will to do that. So yeah, I mean, we're going to do whatever, and, we're just going to have to deal with the repercussions. That's just how it goes.
It is one of those. It's like, I think of, like, the example of the Westboro Baptist Church, where there's a lot of people who've left it. I think Megan Phelps is one of them, and I've listened to podcasts with her as well, and she's an incredible individual. And she was born in the church, and so like a lot of what they call, like, intellectual atheists, I'll call them, like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, the sort of, ones who have conventions, well, not Hitchens anymore, but the famous atheists, in a sense, who speak about religion in certain ways. And they've said before, where it's like, it's the idea, I think, that's a lot of the time not necessarily the problem, but it's once someone gets indoctrinated, if someone is, say, in air quotes, not born, but say if someone's born with a screw loose in a really, there's a really easy metaphor for it to be like an extreme version. Someone's just a psychopath. They just have zero empathy of any kind at all, and they're just born that way. That person could be a business owner if he had rich, in a air quotes, rich white family, as an example, he could become top of a CEO business. But if he was in an impoverished community and he was a person of colour, potentially in a place where it was already had a lot of issues in that realm, that person, the psychopathy would change from, saying, being business and being cutthroat shark in a business but never killing anyone to if you got into a gang, if you're on the wrong side of things. And it's like, I've had people with myself speak about, circumstance and things, and I'm quite good with numbers. Right. Well, if I was born in, say it was the same mind and same parents, but the circumstances of finances and location were different, if I could have got into drug dealing, or my akin for maths could have helped me, and I could have gone down that path, and I may not be in the job I'm in now. And it's interesting to see, there are, as you say, people in prison, and a lot of it is either circumstances out of their control and they made decisions which did not help themselves, or there are people in prison who had like a moment of rage that is wrong. And I'm not trying to justify a lot of people in there, but if I was in town with my girlfriend, said it again, Megan, and if I was not giving her a name, just forget it.
I'm sure she's grateful that she gets a name.
Yeah, she's been on the podcast a few times as well, so it makes it even worse I'm not naming her, because any regular listeners actually know. Right. But still, it's if I was in town, like, I would never want to hit anyone, and I could say I would never kill anyone. But as you said, if I was in a situation where someone had a knife on Megan and I saw an opportunity and it was them or Megan, I would probably kill them, and then I'd go to prison.
Right.
So that is an extreme example, but that is a really easy, in a sense, black and white way of looking at it. And the more you kind of change the goalposts, the more grey it becomes. And that's when I completely agree with what you've said, is you don't know what people are capable of.
Well, and I mean, not everybody who is in prison is a Carl Ripken, not everybody who's in prison is a Jeffrey Dahmer.
No.
I mean, those people are few and far between. The majority of people who are in prison for just, I mean, like you said, circumstance, doing what they have to do, essentially to live and feed their families, get by, whatever. Or, they've done something like they've lied on their taxes. And now they have parking tickets that are not paid. They were pulled over and they smelled like marijuana. So now they're in jail for 6 months.
And they're in one of the states that doesn't have marijuana that's legal. But if you go a few miles that way, then it's fine.
Right. Exactly.
It's very bizarre.
you bought some edibles in Chicago and then you drove to Wisconsin and got pulled over. Well, you just brought drugs over state line. Guess where you're going? Prison. It's just, I mean, there's no way to say, ultimately. Like, if I was in the same position, I went out somewhere with my wife, we were threatened, and I had to do something, I would do it. I'm not a violent person. I've never hurt anybody else in my life. But if something were to threaten her or threaten my life, I would have to do something. And that might land me in some hot water, but that's something that you just have to do because there's crazy people in the world,
what side of crazy you wanna sort of be on and things.
Yeah, right.
Being human is so weird, and what I find the weirdest is when people we spoke about this a little bit last time, is when people almost criticize you for being, or criticize one for being a air quotes weird person, collecting skulls or having Star Wars tattoos, or which is, I think that me having Star Wars tattoos is more weird than collecting skulls, because I think collecting skulls is amazing and cool. But
I have been called a serial killer on more than one occasion because I collect, to me. Taxidermy and skulls and stuff. Yeah.
But that's so cool. If you go to a museum and you see, taxidermy stuff, there's some of the coolest museums I've been in are just filled with just random stuff explorers have gathered over the years.
I mean, I've personally never wandered into the Milwaukee Museum and thought, wow, that curator, that motherfucker is a serial killer. Absolutely. Never even crossed my mind.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I consider my collection to be akin to kind of like a dime store, like a mini dime museum. You pay your dime and then you get to go in and like look at whatever. And like when people come over, like if my friends come over, they want to see my collection.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's a request. Like,
exactly.
Can I go upstairs to your office and see your office? Like, and I mean, I've added some new things. Like I've got some fossilized remains from a whale, baleen whale. I've got a company called Eccles, made wax noses and like ears and parts of the face for like morticians to use. So I have a wax nose in my collection now.
That's cool.
Just a disembodied nose that just hangs out in my office. And then, I have my taxidermy. I have several different kinds of taxidermy. I have wet specimens. Some of them I've preserved myself. I taught myself how to do that because I think it's interesting to be able to further preserve that life after it's gone so that it can be enjoyed. Yeah, it doesn't make me a serial killer.
No, it doesn't. It's the weird thing is that I've said, I can't remember if I said this to you before, but I've said it on the podcast a couple of times where it's like, people, this is the weirdest thing about it. You don't choose what you like. You can choose what you buy, you can choose what you fill your house with, you can choose what you spend your time doing. But at the end of the day, I like, relatively speaking, everything apart from sport and cars. They're just two things. I like playing sport, but I play football or hockey or basketball, any of those things. I like playing them because it's fun, it's exercise, whatever. But if you said, do you want to sit down and watch 3 hours of it, it's like, if I'm with a couple of people who really want to, yeah, I'll hang out and watch it. But if you're like, would I choose that? No.
Or but you're down to the pub or something, you're hanging out with friends and the soccer game is on. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's fine. I'm more than happy to do that.
The football game. If the football game.
Yeah, well, soccer, football. Yeah, it's and it's funny with it because even when like the World Cup was on and things, like I don't care about football. But when the World Cup's on, I was getting like, oh, England's doing well. I'm happy for everyone in England who cares about football that they're happy, and I was getting into it because everyone else was, and it's a camaraderie. But I don't actually care about sport at all. It's just not anything that appeals to me. But I don't. At work, I've got a couple of workmates and stuff. We give each other shit because I'm a massive Star Wars nerd and movies and etc. And they don't see it in the same way. But I go, well, you guys are nerds too. And they're, well, not really. But you can name every footballer over the last 30 years that have played for any team. You can literally, I can say a team to you in a year and you'll tell me where in the Premier League they were. You're a nerd. You're just a sports nerd. You know about these games that people like to play and people watch them. I, however, like to watch made-up fantasies about space wizards. They're both equally inconsequential to anything. They don't really, apart from the monetary value to the economy in some argument, apart from that, they don't mean anything. So everything is fair game if you want to like what you like. And I love your eclectic collection. If I was ever in Wisconsin, I would just visit you and just come see it all, because that would be nice. And I'd give you a dime as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, yeah. The price of admission.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's it ranges from taxidermy and wet specimens and another recent ad was a mummified goat.
Oh, I think I saw that on Facebook or something.
Somebody sent me a mummified goat. Apparently it's a symbol of good luck.
Okay.
I don't know, but he's cute. His name is Arthur. He has a little tag around his neck and it says Arthur.
That's so cool.
I think that the other part of my collection, I feel like I talked about this a little bit last time too, is knowing where all the pieces come from. It's almost akin to knowing where you come from. There's that much of a comfort in it for me. For example, I can walk into my office right now and pick anything off the shelf and be like, I got this from, this specific place and, the guy who sold it to me. For example, Walter, he's my favorite piece of taxidermy. He's a full mount javelina, peccary pig.
Okay. Yeah, amazing.
And I got him from Craigslist, and the guy who was selling him gave me all of the paperwork that goes with him, and he was actually a B movie prop.
Oh.
So he was used in a really shitty horror movie called Javelina.
Oh, okay.
And you can actually, if you go on YouTube and you type in Javelina movie, you'll get the opportunity to watch Walter run, quote unquote, run alongside a sports utility vehicle for 5 minutes. But yeah, I mean, he has a story. So it's almost like the pieces in my collection are people. It's almost like being interconnected with other people. I think it's the main reason why I gravitate towards the oddball groups on Facebook. Because I know that if I go in there, nobody's going to be like, oh, well, you're a serial killer. Why would you collect, a raccoon skull? That's terrible. Or why would you preserve wet specimens? What are you going to do with that? Yeah. So I gravitate towards these groups where people are already kind of outcasts and considered weird and, or I can't talk to my significant other about it because she's disgusted or she's just not interested in it. yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, through my collection, I've managed to build a community of people who have collections themselves. And now it seems like their collections are slowly migrating into my collection. So, like, they'll post something and they'll be like, I want $20 for this. And I'm like, oh, do I want that? Do I need it? I don't need it, but I do want it. So, yeah, I mean, I just got a box of little odds and ends somebody sent to me. It was like a porcupine quill. There was a fox pelvis, cleaned, like bone. A couple of little shells. A couple of weird seed pods from like I think there's something called like a bat plant or a bat flower or something, and the seed pod actually looks like a bat.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I mean, people pack stuff up and send stuff to me all the time, and it usually happens right after I put out an issue of the literary journal, which just happened.
It's a Corvus review?
Yeah, yep. So, yeah, I just recently released that, so I'm still getting, like, little trickles of things in the mail just to say thank you for, publishing them or whatever. I really wish they would just donate money. I mean, yeah, that sounds kind of bad, but, like, I kind of wish they would, because then I could pay for web hosting. That would be nice. Because, raccoon skulls don't pay the rent, right?
No, and I don't think there's something that's going to necessarily increase in value unless raccoons suddenly go extinct.
Right. Yeah, random seashells, probably, beach glass, probably not gonna. Yeah. This is not a trade and barter system.
No, it's not. Unless there's like an apocalypse thing, and then instead of like bottle caps being the currency, you have seashells, and that's the currency. You're in it. Seashells and animal skulls.
Or like random stamp collections. Gotten like random stamps in the mail. It's just weird.
I got old keys. If I find like an old key somewhere, not a proper house key, I just like really old. I've got one that it's this big. It's so old that if you put it into a lock and twisted it, it would snap. It's that thin and broken. But it's cool because it's part of that fun, that wonder. Like I've always been like, this could be taken the wrong way, but I don't mean it like that. I'd love to have almost X-ray vision, and walking down the street, I love looking like from the pavement or from the sidewalk. I like looking and seeing if people's houses are open, as in the curtains are undrawn and open. Sure. You can see how they've made their lounge, especially if their house is very similar in structure or things to what your house is or anything like that. And you see them and you just go, all these people who are just born into the world without choice and are just have to live the first, probably 10 to 15 years without really any choice of free will, bar really, really small things like what you want to wear, what you vaguely want to eat. And then you get your own little weird nest place and you just collect weird things and put them in a house and it's yours. And I just love when I get in, like a new friend or meet someone who I've known for a while who maybe I had to happen to the house or something, and you go in the house, it's like, I can't make a big deal because it looks like I'm going to steal stuff, like, but I just, so why are you taking so much interest in that coat hanger? It's like, no, it's not, I just think it looks really cool next to that door, next to my back door. But it's just so interesting how people organise things. It's just random stuff. None of it means anything apart from kitchen appliances and maybe you could argue a TV, but everything else is just, like old people and not old people, but rugs and pictures of family on the wall, but also framed movie posters. Like people just, I love it. And I think the thing about history and a lot of the sort of odd things that you collect, which I think are really cool, it's just, as you say, everything has a story. And even if it's just, you look at someone's house, you can tell certain things about them. It's just a nice way to familiarize yourself with a person without actually having to say anything.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because, if you walked into my house, you wouldn't, none of my collection is in the main house.
Hidden away.
It's in a room up over a flight of stairs. And I mean, it's there because a lot of the stuff my wife is not keen. She doesn't want wet specimens in the living room. Like, this is not a thing that she wants, that she desires. So the only thing that I am allowed to keep in the main part of the house that might give you a hint as to exactly how weird I am is a taxidermied duck gaff.
What's a gaff?
So gaff taxidermy is essentially when you attach things to a piece of taxidermy that normally wouldn't be there. For example, a jackalope is a gaff. Okay. Because there's no such thing as a jackalope. It's a rabbit and an antelope. Smushed together.
I see what you mean.
The duck that I have is in a little glass case, a little cloche. It's only small. It's like less than 18 inches.
Okay.
And it's kind of tucked into one side of this shelf that when you walk in through the door, the shelf is there. But you really have to look to see the two-headed duck.
Amazing.
So he's just kind of he's tucked in there. And his name is Frankenduck.
Amazing.
One of them is Frank, and the other one is Duck. So they each have a name. Frankenduck. Yeah.
Genius.
But yeah, I mean that's the only real thing that would give you a clue. My wife is also really into like fantasy and like myths and legends and stuff, but like Arthurian legends.
Oh, Knights of the Round Table, that sort of jazz.
Yeah, she's Dragons, big into that. So like we have a helmet, like a Crusaders helmet that I bought for her for Christmas one year. That's in the entryway. If you look on the walls, there's an artist in Newfoundland. I forget what his name is, but like 6 years ago when we were back home visiting family in Newfoundland, we got to go to his studio and take a little tour. And he does kind of like storytelling, fantasy kind of artwork. So we have one that's a mermaid. We have another one that is like a long ship.
Okay.
Getting tossed in the ocean. And then there's another one of a tiny ship getting tossed in the ocean, and underneath it is a huge kraken.
Oh, amazing.
Coming up through. So, I mean, there's little hints, but you won't really know the extent of the shit that you've gotten into until you go up over the stairs and open the office door. That's when you're like, whoa, okay.
There's hints all around the house, or little Easter eggs, and then you find...
Yeah,
you find the Alice in Wonderland door and you open up and it's all the craziness.
Well, I kind of want to take that door to my office off and put on one of those like bookshelf doors.
Oh, amazing.
Because we never have enough space for books because my wife's an avid reader. So if I got a bookshelf door, then that means that I could put books on the bookshelf door. And then I could open the bookshelf door and go into like my secret office, which I think would be really cool. But
would you try and have it where you have like a specific book and you pull that out and that is the special lever, or would you have it just like a more simple one?
I think they're designed so that like there's a section, like a little section that you reach into, and there's a little knob.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not even thinking something that in depth. You're like. I want to go above my head on it.
Yeah. Next stage is going to be you get your own castle, right? And then you press the bricks in a certain way, and the whole, like
the wall opens, and it's like yeah.
That's exactly it. That's what it's easy to do. God, that wouldn't be horrendously expensive and unnecessary.
Yeah.
How many raccoon skulls could you buy with that? That kind of money.
God.
Oh, man. I was going to say, if you've got still time, if there's not, I'm not keeping you up or anything, if you've got another 15, 20 minutes or so.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, wonderful. I was going to ask you about, there's a theory that I heard about, which is Terence McKenna's theory, actually. And he's a famous psychonaut and things, which is basically avid drug taker. And he spoke about this theory, and it combines with a lot of other things that I was speaking with Megan about earlier, actually. And it's about 200,000 years ago or so. There was the Homo species, which was like more ape-like. Basically, their brain size doubled in the sense of the amount of percentage body weight it was taking up doubled. And so our brains are disproportionately larger compared to our bodies than a lot of other mammals and things. And it happened really, really quickly in an unusual way. And there's a lot of interesting theories as to how that happened. One of them is the stoned ape theory, which is that in cow pats, or cow dung, psilocybin mushrooms grew, so magic mushrooms, and they wouldn't be monkeys, it'd be the ancestor that we share the same as other primates, maybe the missing link, but Homo, whatever it was, they ate these psilocybin mushrooms, and the idea is that it stimulated certain parts of their brain, and over years and years and years, eventually it made it grow in a certain way and made them understand lots of other things, like develop the language center in the brain, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Now, that's a really cool, interesting theory in itself. But then what I like to do is combine it with all the other cool theories at that time of what caused the human brain to double in size. So there's like, you could have that. But then there's also eating meat around that time. So it's maybe... And then there's also hunting as well, okay? So there's the hunting part, which is spears in the Stone Age. You know, that a lot of monkeys and things, primates and things, they use stones to break open stuff. They make spears to go fishing, etc.
Right.
Well, there's the throwing arm of throwing a javelin or a spear. The actual amount of processing power that takes to figure out, you know, is it raining, is there wind? If you throw it, how much force you have to do to get it to hit what you're doing, the force of it, etc. That... mixed with the psilocybin mushrooms, allegedly, mixed with, because they were hunting and things, they were eating meat, which then meat has a certain amount of nutrients in that's much harder to get in, you know, with a purely vegetarian diet. And obviously nowadays you can cultivate that sort of thing, but back then when you're primates you can't really. So a lot of these little things put together, which could have been the cause of the human brain sort of doubling in size. And another one of those theories is, I briefly touched upon it earlier, which is aliens, as some people say. Aliens came down and mated with primates. Yeah, that's it. That aliens. Meme with the guy with the big hair.
With the crazy hair, yeah.
Exactly. And that's one of those theories. And normally when I'm pretty intoxicated around festivals, around a fire, that's normally the time the sort of conversations come out. But it's so fun to think of all these crazy theories as to why the human brain doubled in size. There's probably hundreds of micro reasons that all just happen to culminate into one reason, and that's why. But it's so fun. Like, you can just sit around for hours and say, oh yeah, this thing caused that. And I think my love of it's almost scientific theory, but it's like with Gandalf's pipe and just kind of thinking about it. It's that kind of silliness, and I love that, and I've always loved history. And that's why I think, especially in parts of my life, I've noticed I've got into mythology as well, which obviously you mentioned your partners into in certain ways. But I like, you know, the Greek mythology, but there's also Roman mythology and all the different gods, and obviously that goes into religion.
Right.
And it's just storytelling, isn't it? It's just all stories. And that's one of the weird things about humans, is that it doesn't really matter what you're into. Even sports, in a lot of ways, is the story of it happening, because unless you're playing the sport, you're watching something. What is it other than a story?
Right.
And it's so weird to think about that humans are so into stories, I'd say, in so many different facets, if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, you know, if you think about it, any information that you want to relay to another human being, how do you do it? You tell them a story. I mean, that's the way that we relate to one another. You know, it's not like, hey, Jim, how are you? I'm fine. And then 25 minutes of silence until Jim goes home. Like, no. You know, we want to know about Jim's family and that vacation that he took with his wife and his 2 kids, and, you know, how his dog is doing and what happened to his dog. And, you know, and so we have to weave all of these complex narratives to kind of keep the other person engaged. I mean, if you would ask me at the top of the show, what's going on? And I'd be like, nothing. And then we just fucking sat here. Like, I mean, it just wouldn't work, you know? No. And as human beings, we're narrative creatures. We want to craft narratives so that the world around us makes sense. And I think that you can say that about a lot of things. I think that you can say that about, I feel like I've been on like the religion bashing train for this episode. But I've always firmly believed that, you know, the Bible, the stories of the Bible were crafted as something generic that people could use to form their lives and their existence, and how they functioned within the society that they existed in at that time. Yeah. I don't think it translates real well to today unless you finagle it a little bit, and some people are better with the finagle than others, obviously. But, you know, it's just one of those things. We tell stories so that our world makes sense. And through the telling of these stories, we somehow get that feedback that says, okay, you know, my life kind of makes more sense, or I make more sense to myself now because I had that reaction to that. Like, for example, like I said, I come from a, you know, military police family background. A lot of my family members are either law enforcement or military. And this whole thing with, the unrest, the Black Lives Matter movement and the police, and, the abuse of power and all of this stuff. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's like, what is my narrative, and like, what story do I want to leave behind? And what story do I want to precede me? Like, do I want to be the person, that lady in Central Park who called the police on the bird watcher? Like, do I want to be on that side of history? Or do I want to be the person who's like, this is bullshit. There's no reason why this should be happening to people, to human beings. And it needs to stop. And that to me clearly seems like the right side of history. But to other people, maybe that's not the way their narrative works. Maybe they want to be the bird watcher in Central Park, calling the police on a man who was clearly bird watching. Like, he had everything to go bird watching. And he called you out because you didn't have your dog on a leash. Like, that is bullshit. What are you doing? I mean, if there ever was a Karen, that is a Karen. Yeah, it's just craziness. But yeah, I mean, we tell stories to make sense of the world that we're living in. I'm sure that 10, 20, 30 years from now, we will tell stories to our children trying to make sense of what COVID-19 was and what the Black Lives Matter movement was and, what we did to make our world a better place, no matter what perspective that's from. We're still going to tell those stories and we're still going to share those narratives because what else do we have? I mean, when you think about it, we're just human beings on this giant rock floating through space, and we're just trying to make sense of it all. And maybe we never will, but maybe that's okay,
Yeah, that's one thing that I had to come to terms with in my sort of late teens, where I was like, when it became clear to me that I kind of had like an epiphany, and I was like, oh, I'm never going to know everything. In fact, right. I'm never even going to know even remotely close. Like, not even, like, you think, oh, maybe I'll know 1% of everything. And then you go, okay, that's a bit dumb. Maybe 0.1%. And now I'm like, I don't think the amount of knowledge I have about anything is not even, 100 decimal places. I don't know fucking nothing. Like,
right.
We all just have like a tiny, incrementally tiny piece of the puzzle. That's all we have. Or like we have the world's smallest torch or flashlight, and we're like the size of ants on planet Earth, and we've all got a tiny little light source, and we're all like, no, I know how this all works. I know exactly. I've got it. God doesn't like the gays. That's the problem here. It's like, well, it's probably not. Like, well, it's like, obviously the religion bashing thing. You and I think are both in the same boat where it's like, don't hate religious people because that's not fair. You just hate people who are assholes. Some of them are religious. It's
right.
Not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the other part of it, right? Like, not all assholes are religious. Some people are just assholes.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter.
That's just, if they're religious or not. And it's because of how you were raised. It's because of the circle of friends that you keep. If those people are inclined to believe what you believe and you only surround yourselves with those people, then, I mean, that's where you're going. Like, that's what you're going to understand. That's your pen light that you're shining out into the world, But then I think with the recent things that are going on in the world, you also have to consider that is your legacy. Like, that is what you're leaving behind. So when you post something shitty on Facebook and you say, oh, well, it's absolutely right that police should have just complete power to be able to do whatever because the world is insane and whatever. Or you post something like, not all cops. Okay, I mean, that's fine. Not all cops, not all people are bad. Not all lesbians are bad. Not all, I mean, like, you can't really make that generalization. But at the same time, if I knew that somebody in my circle of friends was bad and doing something wrong, I would probably call that person out on it and be like, dude, you can't do that anymore. That's not right. You can't treat people like that. You can't say that. And And I think that that's a lot of the problem. Like, it's just been let go for so long. You know, people have just accepted that this is the way that the world is. And I think if we're not careful, this is the way the world ends.
Mm.
You know, like, what is that quote? Like, not with a bang, but with a whimper?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, do we really want to be the stupid whimpering masses, or do we really want to take charge of what's going on in the world right now and be like, this is bullshit, we need to change it? Yeah. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not the person out there marching with people. Physically, I'm not able to do that. But I am the person who, like, if I hear people passing by my house in protest, I will go out there and support them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to be that person that's going to come down on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
And actually, I mean, it's something that I've really been struggling with because of the fact that my family is so aligned with these essentially, like, power-controlling entities. That, I mean, you know, I know my cousin works up in, she works on the mainland. I feel like it's maybe Saskatchewan. But she's a police officer. And I mean, I know my cousin and I love my cousin, and I can't see her ever doing something like what was done to George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
I could never, ever in a million years imagine her doing something like that. And then I come back to that conversation that we had about what would you do if you felt threatened?
Mm.
And then I come back to the idea that the police in America are so militarized. And why do we need two militaries? We don't. You know, like, we have a military and we need a police force. But we don't need the police force as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need people in riot gear shooting rubber bullets at people in the face when clearly rubber bullets are supposed to be fired at the ground. I'm not a police officer, and I know this. So for me to know this and police officers to not know that, that's a little scary.
It was the whole situation that's happening over in primarily America, because obviously over here we had Black Lives Matter protests and chants and things, and that's all great and things, and I obviously fully support all that sort of thing. It should almost be a given. Like, well, it's I hear it and I go, well, obviously, but it's not actually that obvious, because there's a lot of people who don't believe that. So it does baffle me. Same as when I found out about, you know, gay marriage in America being legalized and there being actual protests. I was like, I forgot. I forgot people actually for some reason care.
It was only a few years ago that I was worried if my wife had to go into the hospital, that I would not be allowed to go into the hospital with her because I was not related to her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were married, but they were going to tell us that no, I would have to wait in the waiting room. And she would have to go in back. I mean, it was just, it's insanity. And that was only a few years ago. That was very recent.
One of the most baffling things to me is in England, being gay was illegal until the 70s.
You're right.
It was. I think it was 67 or something similar to that. And it was like, I remember when I first heard that fact from, it was actually a gentleman I had on the podcast, a friend of mine he's gay. And I think I looked it up before speaking with him because he mentioned it before our chat and things. And I was like, oh, wait, being gay, I know there's been like a lot of stuff in history which has been very anti-homosexual, but I didn't realize it was actually illegal. And then that's where the polari, the rhyming slang came from in the gay community, because it was, if a man sat on a bench by himself, you sat down next to him, you said a couple of words in polari. If he said words back in polari, you knew you were both gay and you could do with that what you want. Or if he said, what are you saying? You're like, okay, can't. And it's like, obviously, once again, it's the thing of privileges. I'm in that place where I'm like, I couldn't even fathom why that was ever a thing. Who decided being gay to be illegal? I'm like, the baffling thing about that, in the most part, is very similar in the way of sort of Black Lives Matter racism. It's like, I can't fathom it, because it's like, you can't choose who you're attracted to, and you also can't choose your skin color. So how could you ever treat someone differently from them being unable to choose? It's like, and it's with religious fundamentalists, once again, not against religion, but people who are very hardlined in the Bible and things. And it's like, oh no, being gay is a choice. It's like, what? So you could, so if it was like to a pastor or something, you're like, oh, so you could choose to like penis. Like I like, in all honesty, if I was single, I would, if I could choose, I would be bisexual, in the sense of where we're at the point now where it's a palette. It's an area of sex where I'm never going to experience, hopefully, because I'm not into that. It's just penises revolt me. And that I don't.
I mean, present company excluded, I'm sure.
So it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know, mine's pretty grim. But it's one of those. It's so baffling to me. And then with the Black Lives Matter thing, it's the same. And it's like, how...
Yeah.
There's so many other things we can argue about. There's so many things wrong with this world that we could really have a serious conversation about. And there's so many people arguing about hashtag Black Lives Matter and hashtag All Lives Matter. And it's
God.
It's like, how are people still on this? This is like page 1. This was like years ago, and it's come back of the whole... I mean, I'm referring to people saying All Lives Matter. It's like, it is so simple. If your mate has tripped over and hurt themselves, and they go, can you help me, mate? You don't go, oh yeah, but you're not hurt. You're hurt, but I need help. I'm also... But it's like, but you're not on the floor in pain right now. If you fall over in a bit and something goes wrong, we'll help you up. But at the moment, this is what you need to focus on.
Turnabout is fair play. Like,
it's just... Oh, but I don't know. Yeah. Going down rabbit holes of that sort of thing. Yeah,
my favorite explanation of All Lives Matter is you wouldn't go to a funeral where, somebody has just died and one of their loved ones is up giving the eulogy and stand up and be like, actually, all lives matter. No, you wouldn't. Because that would be idiotic, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, God. Yeah.
The world is a crazy and confusing.
Place. I struggled with, because I'm a podcaster, I don't have a huge platform. I don't have a huge following, but I still want to make sure, like I keep saying, I want to come down on the right side of history.
Yeah.
And so I really struggled with the intro for the first episode that's going to be released on Monday because I don't want to come off as, oh yeah, here's this white lady, saying that she understands, what's going on. Because I don't. And I never will, because I'm not of color. I'm not a person of color. I am an other. I do fall into the other category. I'm disabled a little bit. I'm a lesbian. I'm a woman, which glass ceiling is still a thing. So, I understand all of these things, but I will never understand what it's like to be discriminated against because of the color of my skin, because I have that privilege of being white. And I just think it's so asinine that I'm privileged because of my skin color. It's just so asinine. Why can't we just all be humans? It makes no sense to me at all. Coming from a place where there aren't really black people. Like when I was growing up, I didn't know any black people. I knew some Asian people. The majority of the doctors, and it's very strange. In Newfoundland, it's almost like there's like little niches where people are. So like there's like the bad part of town, but that's all white people.
Okay.
So it's like low income housing, but they consider it to be the bad part of town.
Right.
Then you have Chinese food restaurants, they have sushi restaurants and stuff like that. But like laundromats or whatever, what do they call that? Fucking, why am I blanking? I feel like I'm 100 years old right now. I'm like, can't remember shit.
What term?
Dry cleaning places.
That. Okay.
So, the Asian community seems to operate there. And then you have like doctors, lawyers who are all East Indian, which is very strange. And when I was growing up, that was the way I thought about people.
Yeah.
Just everybody being in their own little niches, because I didn't go to school with people who were Hmong.
No, of course, yeah.
Because that wasn't a thing. They lived in a different part of town. So I went to school in the white part of town that I didn't know was the white part of town, because I had this privilege that I could just be like, yeah, I'm just going to go to school. And then at the same time, in another part of town, and somewhere else in the country, there's somebody walking to school who gets shot because they're on somebody's lawn and they just happen to be black. Everything is, it's so fucked up. It's so fucked up.
It is. And it's one of those things where I've said it in the podcast before, and it's one of those things where I'm kind of ashamed of it in some ways, but it's like, I didn't even know racism was a thing until I saw an episode of That's So Raven. I was 8 or 9 years old. And there's an episode of That's So Raven on the Disney Channel where Raven doesn't get a job, but her friend who's white, Chelsea, does get a job, and then the owner says, she doesn't hire black people. And I remember I was at 8 or 9 when I saw that, and I was like, wait, what? Because I'd in the school I went to, I'm from Southampton in England, which is right down south, and England is kind of the stereotypical flip of America. So the up north is stereotypically considered more backwards. It's not, just to clarify to people, but, there generally is a higher percentage of seemingly racism up north, and down south is generally more liberal-ish. And Southampton is dockyards, it's docks and things. We had the Titanic come here before it went. I think it then went to Plymouth and sailed off, or it went to us after Plymouth. But we had some sort of we touched the boat when it was here, and we got a museum about it. Cool,
right?
But because of the docks is multicultural and stuff, we've got a higher population of people from Poland, as well as there's also people of Indian descent and lots of Asian descent as well, and we've got 2 universities, so it attracts a wide berth of people. And so in my primary school, which is will be for you guys, when I was like 5 to 10, that was when there was a Catholic school as well. There were people of all kinds of different races there, so it was normal to me. It was just people of different races, and then I was like, we all treat each other like people, right. And then I saw that episode of That's So Raven, and it changed, and I was like, I remember that being one of the first moments where, kind of reality hits you, and you lose a little bit of your childish innocence. And it was that, because obviously it's from a place of privilege. I'm a very privileged individual. I'm a, white millennial male in England in 2020. You don't really get much higher up apart from trust funds, I'd say.
Ticking all the boxes there.
Yeah. And so I often feel guilty, and I like to say that thing in the podcast about how that's the moment I realised about racism, of just how naive I was at a young age, but because I feel like with this, having a platform, even though I don't have millions of listeners, that'd be nice. I always am in two minds of things when it comes to speaking about things like Black Lives Matter or social movements, when it comes to people of colour and things, because England has a slightly different political view on race than America does. America is more about black and white, but also about immigrants who are Mexican. That's the general stereotypes. Whereas over here, it's more about immigrants that are either Polish or Muslim for some reason. They're the two. It's very bizarre how it works, especially because we're an island and all of our ancestors are immigrants, but still same as America in most ways. Right. It's really weird,
right?
But I always feel odd when I speak about things like Black Lives Matter, because I never want people to think I'm going, this is right, this is the way, and I know because I don't. I'm just saying my opinion, but it's like I hope that people hear the sincerity, and I'm like, I just try and let people say their opinions on the show and stuff, but I generally have people I agree with for the most part. But it's like, I always feel like I don't want anyone to hear the show and be like, oh, he's talking like he knows from experience. Like, I really don't. Like, I want to put my hands on gun. I from this sort of thing, I do feel do you know what I mean? Like, it's this weird thing to explain. It was like, not quite white guilt, because I don't feel guilty about doing anything. But, it's, I don't want to say I know what it's like in their shoes, because especially from where I am, like, I'm straight and things, so it's even less on that part. I always feel guilty in a sense talking about some of these issues, acting like I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Do you know what I'm coming from? I'm kind of rambling on. I said the same thing 3 times.
Yeah, this concept of white guilt. I read something recently about a girl who it was on Facebook. She'd marched with her whole family, person of color, in the Black Lives Matter marches in Milwaukee. And she said that she kept marching past white people who were crying. And she's like, what right do they have to stand there and visibly show their sadness when, like, we're being murdered? It just, and so I always think about that. I'm like, this concept of white guilt. Like, I'll be the first to admit, when I see people marching for a good cause, I do get very emotional, because I feel like I support them and I'm on the right side of history. I feel like they're good people trying to do the right thing, and that's who I want to ally myself with. But at the same time, when I start to feel like I'm going to get emotional about it because I am experiencing this, I have to leave. Because I feel like it's not my right to make it about me. And I think that that's the whole, like, this whole concept of white guilt. Like, you know, well, if I'm guilty about it, then that's making it about me. And it doesn't really matter so much that I'm guilty about it. It matters more what I do now to you know, in my thoughts and my actions, the way that I operate every day, the way that I treat people. That's what matters. And what happened. We can't go back in time and fix slavery. We can't keep that from happening. You know, I mean, people who have ancestors who were slave traders, you can't go back in time and change your name. You can't do it. That was shit that happened. You know, I mean, they sold people like cattle, and it's abhorrent. And there's no need for that. But you can't just be like, well, I'm really, you know, and I'm not shitting on you either.
No, of course, no.
This is just my own personal perspective, but like
100%.
I feel like I can't personally be like, yeah, I'm really guilty about it, and then just be with that, you know? Like, I feel like I have to, like, this is the reason why I feel guilty about it, but I'm gonna keep it kind of to myself and, like, low-key, because I don't want to be that person who takes away from what you're doing.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's, I see what you're saying, and that's what I mean, is that's why, in part as well, where I was like, try making it about me. Like, if I'm, instead of me talking about these issues, it's like, well, does anyone really want to hear my opinion on these issues? But it's like, on the other side, it is like, but if I'm saying my opinion on this, maybe someone hears what I have to say, and then they look into it more and go elsewhere and become more informed in it. And it's like,
well, and then you're the one with the privilege.
Yeah.
Right? So then you feel like, well, I should say something, I should do something, I should be in these marches, I should be visible because I am white. And because there are other people besides me who are being treated badly, I should use my whiteness as a tool to raise awareness and to bring other people, like you said, to awareness, to let them know what's going on. I mean, I think that that's profoundly important. I just really, I really don't want to come off as that person who's like, and now it's about me. Like,
that's the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Like, you don't want to be that person who's so outspoken that you take away from what other people are experiencing. Because,
and it's the
like I said
sickening.
before, I mean, even though, you know, I am an other, I will never know what it is to be that other.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. So that's kind of where I am on it.
Yeah, and the same as virtue signaling, is it's kind of like rounding off finishing points and things. It's just, I also don't want to come across like I'm being some sort of, look at me, look how valiant I am. I support Black Lives Matter, and therefore I am amazing. Moral compass is aligned. I'm not saying I'm not saying white people who support Black Lives Matter are doing that. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying I also worry about coming across like I'm only doing it to be, I'm like, look at me, look at me because I'm doing the right thing, therefore I'm good. Right. And obviously, that's once again, that's not attacking you or anyone else. It's that weird tightrope in my own mind where I'm overthinking to such a unnecessarily ridiculous degree that the only point should really be is just be nice to people generally and be good. Like, one of the reasons I want to have kids one day is because I would like to be able to raise someone and let them have an awesome life. And if they have friends who, maybe if they've got parents who aren't as awesome, they can come over our house and chill with, like, my parents I was fortunate that my parents let all my friends come over my house all the time. And some of them who had not as good home lives or things or whatever, they come over and just hang out. And it's not a big deal. And it's those sort of things where, like, if you could just bring a little bit of good in the world, either via podcast or just raising a good kid or doing community projects or protesting or any of these things, if everyone just generally did that, it would be such a better place. And that's, I guess, what everyone just has to kind of aim for, really. Yeah.
I mean, pretty much. I think that, you know, the protesting and making sure that the people who are doing wrong are punished for what they do. I think that that's a good step in the right direction. I still think it's a small step, but I mean, any step is better than no step.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I think that's probably... I won't go on to another subject now because we'll end up talking all night. Even though we had more notes, we'll save for another time. But it's been absolutely amazing having you on and chatting with you, Janine. I feel like I could have probably chat for all night, but probably have to leave this room because I am sweating. I'm so warm in here.
I mean, you're gross. Sweating? I'm in a closet, dude. There's no air conditioning in this closet.
We don't have air conditioning in this whole building.
Oh, seriously?
It's England. We do England, unless you're in a supermarket or in a big office, you do not have aircon. We have windows and fans.
You should get one of those portable jobbies. Those are awesome.
Got a little fan. We've got a little fan that's like it's about 3-4 foot high, and it oscillates. And we only get about maybe a month, maybe 2 months of summer, if that.
Oh, sure.
And we've had a couple of weeks of summer, and now we're in the kind of muggy middle, and then we're gonna have a few more weeks in a bit, and then that'll be the end of it. So most English people don't have aircon because it just costs quite a lot of money for something that we don't need it for. So because we get overcast, right?
Yeah, we got a portable one that you can plug in, and it has like the adapter for the window, with a hose that goes out. Yes. And it's just, I mean, it's literally like a compressor on wheels, and it just blows the most beautiful cold air that you could ever imagine. It was like $200.
That's amazing.
It's an investment. It's a good investment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm somehow losing my voice, which has never happened on a podcast before, ever. So you win a prize there for that. Or maybe I lose a prize for talking far too much and not letting the listeners listen to your amazing stories. But it's been great having you on, Janine. I'll put details in the description and things, but if you just want to say where people can find you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So if you want to look at my blog, I put the show notes up there every week for the Identity Podcast. It's theidentitypodcast.wordpress.com. If you want to find me on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at IdentityPod. I'm also on Facebook as the Identity Podcast. And if you have like weird, crazy, ridiculous stories, or you have like a topic you want me to cover, you can send all that to theidentitypodcast@gmail.com.
That's wonderful. And I'll be sure to include all the links in the below description and stuff.
Awesome.
So, yeah, once again, Janine, absolutely still having you on, and definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I'm glad that you're well, and I hope that you stay well. And I hope that all of your listeners stay well and wear a fucking face mask.
Yeah, I showed you my face mask earlier, so I've got little owls on it, so I'm all good.
All right. Awesome.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. I want to remind everyone that Janine appeared on Genuine Chit-Chat for the first time on episode 78, so make sure you go back and listen to that episode for more weird and wonderful conversations with her. It is always so much fun to have her on the show. And also make sure you go check out the ODDentity podcast, because some of the things that we spoke about here, the weird and the wonderful and legends and cryptids and stuff, that's the kind of thing that the ODDentity podcast tackles for the majority of the episodes. Like that sort of thing, true crime, folklore, just lots of weird, cool, different things that not a lot of podcasts are doing necessarily, so make sure you check that out too. Coming up in the next few weeks, I think I said before, if anyone listened to the very end outro of my previous episodes, I'm not recording any more episodes for the time being. I've already got about 5 or 6 other people who have been contacting me, speaking about doing a podcast with them. Some have been on the show before, some have not been, so that's going to be quite interesting to do that too. The people I've got coming on the show, I've got Scott Weatherly of the 20th Century Geek. We've got a 2-parter recorded. I've got a 2-parter recorded with a gentleman called Jared Speed, who basically is the founder of one of the float labs down here in Southampton, which is like an isolation tank and things. If anyone listens to Rogan, you'll know what a float tank is, but you basically go into this pod with salt water, float, you can't feel anything, and it puts you in this nice, calming, resting state. I did it for the first time about last year now, before COVID and things, and we got talking on social media, and that's how it basically happened. So it was such a great chat with Jared, and I can't wait to release that. I'm not sure if that's going to be out next week or the week after. I haven't fully decided, but I'll kind of play that by ear, really. And then I've got one other podcast recorded with my friend Goff of Beer Nuts Productions. This is going to be Goff's 4th time on the show, and we'll talk about his new things, as well as how lockdown kind of affected Australia and things like that. So really interesting things coming up, and some of the other guests that I've got that I'm soon to be lined up, they're going to be some different conversation and topic matter as well. Subject matter, that was the word. Anyway, so that's really what you can expect from Genuine Chit-Chat for the next month or two, really. And then when I've got more things recorded with other guests, I'll have a bit more things to talk about. But I'm trying not to have too many recorded in for too long period of time because, yeah, then it takes ages to release episodes to people and they become really delayed. But besides that, one thing I wanted you guys to check out as well, I have included a link in the description about it, was that I appeared on the second episode of Comics on Trial. Now, Comics on Trial is a new show on the feed of Comics in Motion, which is where my Star Wars Comics in Canon podcast is, that gets released every Saturday. And essentially, the episode that was released, I believe it was September 20th, it was myself, Scott Weatherly of the 20th Century Geek podcast, basically debating about Star Wars The Phantom Menace. I was defending it, he was prosecuting it, and Paul from Superheroes for Dummies, which is also found on the Comics Emotions feed, he was the judge. So that was a lot of fun. I'm going to be doing another Comics on Trial at some point in the future too, and there was one that's been released for Batman vs Superman, and there's also been one for Hulk, the 2003 one. So lots of really cool fun things going on the feed of Comics in Motion. I really recommend people subscribe to that, not only because you get my show Star Wars Comics in Canon every Saturday, but there's a different show every day of the week about comic books, about movies, about lots of different things. So it's a really good way to go on there if you want some new Star Wars content, if you want some new comic content, if you want just nerdy cool stuff, it's a really good way to go over to that. And then, you know, I've also mentioned that in my show notes, there's lots of other places I've been and done other guest stuff on, like Comics in Motion. I've been on their show once or twice because I've been on that. Well, I've been on their main show and I've showed up on Indie Comic Spotlight, and then I've also showed up on Mandatory Marvel and DC, and there's another podcast called Room, and I've been on that, and I've been in 2 episodes of that, and that was doing some voice acting, which is quite interesting. So I've done quite a lot of different things here and there, but that's really everything from me apart from my Star Wars podcast. So I'm going to talk about that and then hang up, really. So the Star Wars podcast, it's called Star Wars Comics in Canon. It releases every Saturday on the feed of Comics in Motion, and I talk about Star Wars comics. However, this week, the one just passed, is actually about the book Master and Apprentice. I did my first ever book review. I kind of did it in a slightly different format to what I've heard from other people doing it. I did within the podcast kind of 3 phases of spoilers. So the first phase is no spoilers at all, barely any plot details, and just me talking about my opinion on it, and I read the blurb. The second phase was me reading the sort of title crawl in the book, giving some information about sort of the lighter details of the plot, some of the characters, and some of the things that you can expect from reading the book. And then the third section, I give a lot more information, and then right at the very end, I give a full overview of the general plot, but I do give plenty of time for spoilers to that. I have had people, I mean, it only got released from me recording this yesterday, but I've already had at least one person speak to me and say that they liked the structure of it and how I did it. So I'd be really interested to hear more feedback on that. I'm going to be doing more book reviews in the future, but that is pretty much it from me, guys. As I always say, you know, check out all the people associated with this podcast, guests who've been on it, people on the Comics in Motion feed, all kinds of other things, because collaboration in the podcasting realm is so key. Thank you, as always, guys, for listening. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to be rambling on forever. So really appreciate you guys listening, as always. And yeah, talk to you next week.